famous serial killer. His crimes a century old, yet his mystery still lingers. His victims, 5, 7, or perhaps 11 women, brutally murdered in ways that defy imagination. Over 100 suspects have been named, some among the unlikeliest of candidates: a lawyer, a barber, even the Queen's grandson. Despite decades of investigation, the identity of this killer remains shrouded in mystery. It's Jack the Ripper. The year is 1888. We find ourselves in Whitechapel, a grim, fog-drenched corner of East London. A place where the poor outnumber the rich, where crime and poverty fester. As a result of unemployment, the residents turn to alcohol and consumed by misery, disease, crime and despair. Life was bleak, death was a frequent visitor. Yet, even in such a grim setting, a new wave of terror began. Death was almost a given in a place plagued by disease and despair. But this was something different. A series of brutal murders, so savage that they captured the attention of the world. The killer didn't just take lives, he mutilated his victims with chilling precision, removing organs and leaving grotesque marks. Many believed he had medical knowledge, possibly a doctor. But who was he? After the discovery of the first 2 victims, the press and police quickly realized they were dealing with a serial killer. But who could this monster be? A doctor? A butcher? Someone with a precise understanding of the human body? The investigation quickly spiraled out of control. In the span of just 3 years, the police documented 11 murders. Yet 5 of these victims, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Edders and Mary Jane Kelly, stand out, forever known as the canonical 5. These women, all prostitutes, suffered similar gruesome fates, their bodies mutilated beyond recognition. With each murder, the killer's brutality escalated. The crimes were calculated, occurring in the early hours of the morning, often on weekends. But then, just as suddenly as it had started, the killings ceased. The city heaved a sigh of relief, but was it truly over? While other women were slain in the following years, none bore the unmistakable signature of Jack the Ripper. But the horror didn't fade, though. It only grew. London's newspapers fed the frenzy, capturing every detail of the grisly crimes with lurid precision. The name Jack the Ripper was born. But with this fame came hundreds of letters, some claiming to be from the killer himself. Most were fakes, written by journalists or madmen hoping for notoriety. But some were real. The Dear Boss letter. A letter boasting of the murders, mocking the police, and promising more bloodshed. "I will send the ears of the next victim to the police," the letter said. But the chilling twist. Catherine Edders was found with her ear missing, yet no ear ever arrived at the police station. Was this the Ripper taunting them? Or just another twisted hoax? There has been a lot of controversy over this letter, although it is most likely a hoax, and it was said that it was from the press in order to make the topic more famous and stir up controversy. Many were convinced of its authenticity after the body of Catherine Edders was found missing an ear. And then there was the saucy Jackie letter, which arrived right after the double murder of Catherine Edders and Elizabeth Stride. It is believed from the handwriting that its author was the same one who wrote Dear Boss. You will hear about a crime tomorrow, but it's a double. This time, the Capital's police published the Dear Boss letter along with Saucy Jack postcard in the hope that someone would be able to recognize the handwriting, but nothing happened. Nothing more came of it. Still, the press sensationalized every word, every clue, feeding the Ripper's fame and making him a legend. The police later claimed to have identified journalist Tom Bolin as the author of the letters. The letters were lost from the police files, but almost a century later, the letter Dear Boss was returned by an unknown person, but Saucy Jackie card never reappeared. That the most disturbing letter of all was the letter from hell. accompanied by half of a human kidney, possibly from Catherine Eddowes. This letter sent chills down the spine of everyone who read it, and like much of the other evidence in the files of the Jack the Ripper case, the letter and kidney vanished, leaving only a photo behind. Despite these clues, the Ripper remained a phantom. It is not known exactly how many letters were received by the authorities and the media during the time of the murders, but the number was likely to have reached a few thousand. Police reportedly investigated more than 700 letters. The investigation was chaotic. Crime was rampant in Whitechapel, and the bulk of the murders were carried out at the hands of street gangs. Common crimes were theft, robbery, or random murder. No forensic techniques existed to trace the killer. Fingerprints weren't yet a tool for the police. Forensic doctors sometimes did not have any medical knowledge at all, and medical knowledge was limited. The detectives could only rely on confessions or lucky breaks. But despite hundreds of letters, over 100 suspects, and the scorn of a mocking press, the killer slipped through their grasp. The failure to arrest the killer led to severe criticism from newspapers in London at the time. Satirical caricatures and scathing articles were published on a daily basis to ridicule the futile efforts of Scotland Yard. By 1889, Jack the Ripper was a name feared around the world. His crimes were infamous, but no one could stop him. Theories aside, more than 100 suspects were named over the years. Some suggest a doctor, a man of education who knew the human body well. Others speculate he was an ordinary worker, someone who lived in Whitechapel, blending in with the grim landscape. Maybe he was a butcher, a barber, and this could explain why the murders happened on weekends, or even someone from the upper echelons of society, taking advantage of the fact that no one would care about the murder of prostitutes from that area. So many suspects are still being proposed based on new evidence or speculation. The following suspects are those whom the police suspected during investigations at the time of the murder. There is a glaring lack of conclusive evidence linking these individuals to the crimes, but nevertheless each aroused strong suspicion among the inspectors and officials who followed the investigation. Montague John Druitt, a lawyer and schoolmaster, whose suicide occurred just weeks after the last Ripper murder. His death, combined with his sudden expulsion from his job, sparked suspicion, but no concrete evidence ever linked him to the crime. The only thing linking him to the murders was the timing of his suicide. His grandmother and mother were known to be mentally ill. Severin Kłusowski, also known as George Chapman, born in Poland, Chapman emigrated to the United Kingdom shortly before the murders began and worked as a barber in Whitechapel during the Ripper murders. He was hanged in 1903 on charges of poisoning 3 of his wives. Kłusowski's medical background raised suspicions, but experts dismissed him due to the difference in murder methods. Aaron Kosminski was considered by Chief Inspector to be the prime suspect. He worked as a hairdresser in Whitechapel during the Ripper murders. He was a mentally ill man and was admitted to Colney Hatch Asylum in 1891. Years after the murders, documents were discovered revealing that Kosminski was a police suspect. The reasons for including Kosminski in the investigation are not clear, as there is only a little evidence that indicates that he was the Ripper. In a recent book by author Russell Edwards called Naming Jack the Ripper, he said that he has conclusive evidence that Aaron Kosminski is Jack the Ripper, based on forensic evidence that he obtained through a DNA test that was conducted on a shawl they found next to the victim, Catherine Eddowes. The shawl was taken from the crime scene by a policeman who wanted to give it to his wife. She felt disgusted by the shawl and kept it in a closed box without washing it. The family passed this shawl until it reached the author. He analyzed the blood remains and samples on the shawl by scientists and matched them with a descendant of Kosminski. But many criticized this theory based on not publishing the results of the DNA analysis. And without the analysis, these results do not prove anything. Howard Holmes, or H.H. Holmes. Thanks to his record as one of the most famous serial killers and con artists in America, some believe that Holmes may have committed the Whitechapel murders. Holmes often made money by selling human skeletons to medical schools, the skeletons that are now suspected of being his many victims. There are those who point to evidence proving that Holmes was in London trying to sell these bones in the same year that the crimes began. And based on the large number of killings he committed and his possible trip to London during the Ripper killings, some conclude that Holmes could be Jack the Ripper himself. Holmes is famous for the murder castle in Chicago. It was a maze of soundproof rooms, secret passages, gas chambers, acid baths, and incinerators, with layout only known to Holmes. He would lure young women traveling alone to stay at his hotel, where he would torture and kill them. Holmes was later convicted of murdering his assistant, Benjamin Petersell, and his 3 children. After his conviction, Holmes wrote a long confession which he sold to a company. The book was published in newspapers all over the country. Holmes' life story is inconsistent. At first, he claimed innocence. Then he said that he had been possessed by a demon, causing him to run numerous frauds and thefts under false identities, killing countless people. Holmes was hanged in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on May 7, 1896. And then, there are the more unusual theories. What if it was someone from the royal family? Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence and Avondale. At least 2 major films focus on the suspected role of this member of the royal family in the Whitechapel murders. Prince Albert, Queen Victoria's grandson, was allegedly involved in a number of prostitution-related scandals. In 1970, British physician Thomas Stowell published an article implying that the prince committed the murders during bouts of insanity caused by an advanced case of a bacterial disease. This questionable claim sparked a storm of criticism. Some contemporaries continue to explore whether the man who could have become king is the most famous serial killer in history. One of the most famous theories is a conspiracy involving several people to cover up the prince's illegitimate child. The plot included silencing anyone who knew about the child and consisted of Queen Victoria, the Prime Minister, Lord Salisbury, London Police, Walter Sickert, and a number of ministers. Most of the theories surrounding Prince Albert were debunked due to documented evidence indicating that he was not in London at the time of the murders and that he may not have been suffering from illness. Theories about the alleged members of the royal conspiracy are highly improbable, but still inspiring imagination over the years. There's even a theory that Jack the Ripper wasn't a man at all, but a woman, Jill the Ripper. A number of people, including Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, author of Sherlock Holmes, toyed with the idea that Jack the Ripper was not a bloodthirsty man, but rather a woman. The only female suspect considered by investigators is Mary Percy, an English woman who was executed in 1890 for killing her lover's wife and child with a carving knife. In 2006, a study conducted by the Australian scientist Ian Findlay produced surprising results that gave credibility to the Jill the Ripper theory. Findlay travelled to London to collect saliva from a selection of Jack the Ripper's letters that experts believe it is the most reliable. Then he analysed it, and although the results were not at all conclusive, they indicated that the sender was likely a woman. More than 100 years later, we still don't know for sure. The mystery of Jack the Ripper haunts us. His crimes, unsolved to this day, have become folklore. Is it possible that we will one day discover the true identity of Jack the Ripper? Despite countless investigations, books, and theories, Jack the Ripper's identity remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Was he a doctor, A butcher? A member of the aristocracy? Or someone the police never even suspected? Perhaps, one day, new evidence will finally unmask the killer. Or perhaps, Jack the Ripper will remain what he is today, a chilling enigma, the first modern serial killer, and the most mysterious figure in criminal history.